Welcome to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch, Chief Editor at Smart Publishing, and this is the podcast where we explore all things writing, publishing, and the impact of storytelling. In each episode, I'll share insights and strategies to help you navigate the book journey, whether you're writing, publishing, or already an author. Plus, you'll hear from inspiring authors who are using their book to change lives. And if you're passionate about storytelling and ready to make an impact, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Now let's get started. Hey, welcome to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch from Smart Publishing, and this episode today is just me, and it's actually not what I thought I was going to talk about just before this episode. So I thought I was going to do a different episode that I'll probably maybe do next week, but this one's just really on my mind as far as topics go. So today's topic, or the title of today's episode, is what's the deal with word count? So why is this on my mind? I get a lot of questions from authors about typically page count, but sometimes word count, where they're stressing that they haven't written enough content, or that 4 or 6 Microsoft Word pages isn't enough. And I always go back and I tell them the same thing: just focus on the story, focus on getting the value of your content out there, the real meat of it. And as your editor, I will handle and worry about your page count. When I think about page count, what I'm most concerned with is I'm most concerned with getting a readable spine on your book. So there is a minimum page count to which you can have printing on the spine of your book, so that if, of course, your book is on a bookshelf, you can identify what book it is because it's got the title of the book, it's got the author of the book on there. Technically, it's 76 pages, but that would be so tiny, barely anybody would be able to read it. So my rule of thumb is somewhere around 100. For example, my book, The 1 Hour Author, that's actually 97 pages, and it has a pretty good readable spine on it. But usually if you come in around 100, 105, you're going to be pretty comfortably in the nice looking readable spine territory for your book. So that's page count, and page count is a little bit more of like a printing concern, like I'm talking about with having a readable spine. But there's this other conversation that is always going on amongst writers, especially in the writing groups that I'm in, around minimum word count. So for example, a novel has to be a minimum word count typically of around 90,000 words. So where does that even come from? That is really driven by traditional publishing. So when I say traditional publishing, I'm talking about HarperCollins, I'm talking about Random House, I'm talking about, these giants out there who have tons of data, who have tons of marketing dollars behind what they do. And, usually in traditional types of bookstores, of course, they sell online too. If you didn't sell online these days, you would still be in business. But where they've really evolved from is the space of selling books on shelves in bookstores. And so they have a lot of data when it comes to what people will buy in terms of the size of the book and what they can sell it for. So because traditional publishers have a ton more overhead than a publisher like Smart Publishing, which is an independent publisher, they have to set their book prices pretty high. So if you haven't been in a bookstore lately, you're going to see average hardcover prices of around like $30. You're going to find paperbacks for sometimes over $20. So seemingly pretty expensive books that they need to get an ROI essentially from pushing that book out. So they have a lot of data in terms of the book size. And so they require from the authors who they sign a minimum word count so they can get a book to a size that their data shows a potential reader will feel is worth the purchase price. So if you know me, why did I just audibly sigh like that? Because goodness, Lord have mercy, forgive me, I'm going to say, size doesn't matter. It's the value of what matters. Okay, sorry for the innuendo. It was right there front and center. I had to. But when it comes to books, it's if it's a fiction book, even a nonfiction book, it's the experience that matters at the end of the day. If it's nonfiction, it's educational, it's if it really made an impact in what you're trying to learn about or what you're trying to understand, that matters. It's not the size of the book. And oftentimes, I'm sure you've been there, you've picked up a book where there just seems to be so much fluff and so much filler, or the author just seems to be talking in circles around the same thing over and over again, that you don't even finish the book because it's such a poor experience, or it's so convoluted, you're not even learning what you thought the book was going to teach you about. And so the value of it, because the traditional publisher was focused on the size of the book, so that perceived like, oh, okay, yeah, this is a big book, it looks like it's worth $30, actually ended up backfiring when you cracked the book open and tried to read it and get through it. So that is what I feel is the problem that is created by these minimum word counts, is having these books out there that just have too much fluff, too much filler, and to the point to where it just turns into a really poor reading experience. So here's what I think the solution is. I think the focus on minimum word count is completely the wrong focus. I don't understand why they don't have more of a focus on minimum page count. You can still get a large looking book, but a book that has more value in it than just adding words to add words. There are so many different content strategies that you can do with a variety of content in addition to just words to grow the size of your book through the final page count versus the final word count. So what do I mean by that? If you have a book where there's some really reflective material in it, add some journaling sections so that the reader, as they're reading through the book, okay, now we've got some reflection questions. Well, look at that. I don't have to write in a separate journal. I can actually write my thoughts, pen to paper right here in the book and keep it all in one spot. That is a way to add breadth to your book. Another way, if you're trying to teach something that is, visual or, it's more story form or something, add some images in there, add some pictures, add some diagrams, add some storybook images. If it's something that's more fiction based, add something that's going to bring the words to life and create more value for the reader. And also, that stuff takes up a pretty good amount of page space too, to increase your page count. I could go on and on and on. And in my first book, I actually created leadership scenarios after every chapter so that the reader could go through, read a leadership scenario, read the different options, and based off of the option they picked, read what the outcome would be. So I had something that was interactive within the book. So again, sky's the limit. The only limit is your creativity, but add stuff that actually creates value for the reader into your book versus focusing on arbitrary amount of words. So that's always what I go back to my authors with. One, I don't want my authors to worry about it. That's something that I need to worry about as the editor. But what I always go back to them with is to just focus on getting the meat onto the page. If they're recording, and we're doing audio transcription, get the meat out into the audio recording. And I will worry about how to get the book to a minimum, page count to where it's a nice looking book. And then of course, we've got some books that are in bookstores out there. If we have extended distribution or expanded distribution, we have the ability to get in bookstores and libraries, but most books are bought offline now. And so there's no longer, this physical shopping where somebody's picking it up, somebody's, cracking it open. A lot of books are bought in a way where you can't even tell what the size of the book is because you're just looking at the page cover on Amazon or on barnesandnoble.com or wherever it is that you're picking the book up from. I hope that word count is going to, as we continue to see more online sales, it's going to become a thing of the past for traditional publishers, I would hope. But, if I was talking to anybody in traditional publishing now, I would say, please, I have read some of the books that came from you guys and stopped after I felt like I was reading the same thing over and over, discussed in 3-4 different ways. Please stop doing that. Please start focusing on getting value content into the book so that it's a great reading experience and your reader is happy versus a bait and switch sort of technique to where you're just trying to look at that big book over there. Yeah, that looks like it's $35. Okay, I'll spend $35 on it. Ridiculous. Okay. So rant over, podcast pretty much wrapped up. I just want to say I've got some really, really great episodes coming up. I'm going to have an episode coming up really soon with John Clark, the author of Cancer Diaries. We're going to dive into his recent release and, his whole story. He's actually the author of multiple books. And this is a real standout release for him. Obviously, it marks massive, scary, but also inspirational journey in his life. So we're going to dive into all of that. And then I'm really, really, really excited because in March, late March, I'm going to have our lawyer on the show. So exciting. I'm excited about that because we're going to talk about intellectual property rights, which is a really big question that we get quite a bit. We're also going to talk about defamation too, which should be a question that we get more often, but typically it comes in the form of us talking to authors and being like, hey, you might, we're going to need to be careful about discussing that. Or, hey, I don't think you're going to be able to discuss that directly in the book. And so how, as an author, do you protect your intellectual property rights? What do you do when you feel your intellectual property rights are being violated? And then also, how do you protect yourself if you're writing a story that has, potentially other people mentioned in it? How can you make sure that you stay away from getting a defamation suit brought against you? Very, very important in publishing when you're publishing real stories. So thanks for tuning in today. I hope you tune in for those future episodes. And if you like this episode, please take some time to rate, review, and subscribe and tell a few people that you know about the podcast. Until next time, keep writing your story.